While fall and winter is approaching, most people are preparing to winterize their homes and lifestyles. Whether that's yard cleanup or getting new tires on your vehicle, fall and winter is also a great time to plan for new spring and summer projects. Gardening, for instance, can be time-consuming to put together, but if you plan accordingly, you can better prepare where you will place a garden and what plants and materials are needed. Gardens are appealing for many reasons. They bring stale landscapes to life and can increase property value. Colorful array of flowers infatuates and entertain our curiosity for the natural wonders, and they support a diverse group of pollinators and wildlife, which allows us to observe their busy schedules. While many types of gardens can be installed, there is one type of garden that not only can beautify your property, but help reduce storm runoff issues: a rain garden. In this video, we will cover what a rain garden is, the benefits of a rain garden, why homeowners might want to install one, and how these gardens can help improve water quality issues within local waterways. As a bonus feature of this video, we will also discuss how you can use your rain garden to collect, store, and sow seeds for more garden purposes. A rain garden consists of a variety of water-tolerant plants that grow within depressed areas where water collects during a rain event. The plants within the garden will absorb and filter the water within 12 to 48 hours. These gardens are typically placed close to your home or further out on your property. There are several reasons why a rain garden might be of interest to a homeowner. Before we dive in, let's start by understanding what happens when it rains and where the water goes. When you water your house plant, have you ever watched what happens to the water? Usually there are two things that happens. First, the water is absorbed by the soil, where the plant will use its roots to drink the water and absorb nutrients. As some of the water is absorbed, the remaining water passes through the soil and exits onto a tray beneath the pot. Though this is a simple exercise, when it rains, something similar happens in nature. When there is a rain event, water obviously falls from the sky and lands on the ground. Once the rain lands on the ground, there is potential for the droplets to pick up nutrients, sediment, and pollutants from the surface before draining into the soil. Plants, fungi, and bacteria then uptake these excess particles to benefit their survival. Meanwhile, the excess water that doesn't get absorbed by organisms will pass through small spaces between soil and sediment particles. The water continues to drain deeper into what's called the water table or saturated zone. This is also commonly called groundwater. While this is a natural process and people have learned to utilize the groundwater table for both drinking and irrigation purposes, the rise of human development has caused serious issues for local waterways, such as streams, rivers, and especially Lake Erie. There's significant increase in sidewalks, parking lots, highways, streets, driveways, and other paved surfaces, making these impermeable for rainwater to pass through. This is called storm runoff, as there is potential for rainwater to pick up harmful pollutants and waste. This excess water is then directed into a storm drain, where it exits into a nearby water source such as a river, lake, or stream. In other words, storm runoff isn't directed to a water treatment facility. In addition, the increase of impermeable surfaces also removes vital plants, fungi, bacteria, and soils that filtrates runoff. Overall, harmful particles within the storm runoff reduces water quality and can negatively affect aquatic ecosystems as a result. Point source pollution refers to a single source of pollution. Factories such as oil refineries, paper mills, and various manufacturers may discharge pollutants directly into a body of water. Non-point source pollution does not originate at one single point and rather is the release of pollutants within a large area. Examples of non-point source pollution include pesticides, herbicides, pet waste, yard debris, cigarette butts, plastics, and other litter. Despite the pollutants may be dispersed within a large area, they easily accumulate during a large storm event. Despite that there are more human development initiatives being implemented, there are some areas of improvement to reduce pollution runoff. Green infrastructures, which are green spaces that contain gardens, forests, and other vegetative habitats, are being installed throughout cities and townships to improve water quality and provide natural recreation for people to enjoy. These green spaces are also meant to support native wildlife such as pollinators and birds. Lawns, however, are not good green infrastructures. While they do provide a managed look to a property, the grass used for lawns require maintenance, which many homeowners go to the extreme to make their lawns look perfect. Herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers, as emphasized, are sources of harmful nutrients and pollutants that have indirect effects. In addition, lawns don't have deep root systems to absorb excess nutrients from fertilizers that seep into the ground, whereas native plant species have deep root systems. Some native prairie grasses, for example, can grow 15 feet deep into the ground. As a result, these plants are capable of absorbing and locking those nutrients before the remaining water drains into the groundwater table. Property owners interested to install a rain garden can help reduce these issues. Statistically speaking, rain gardens can remove 90% excess nutrients and chemicals and up to 80% of loose sediment from storm runoff. Rain gardens are also more efficient, absorbing excess water by 30% more than lawns. In addition, not only do the deep and intricate root systems of rain gardens help filter, but they also help stabilize the soil and prevent erosion. While constructing a rain garden may be daunting for first-time gardeners or landscapers, following along the step-by-step guide will help you understand the placement and installation requirements needed to create a beautiful and efficient rain garden. While discussing the steps, we will also encourage viewers to take notes and use the resources provided by this video. Here are some tips to also think about. Make sure that you are aware of underground service lines or utilities. Phone numbers are listed for further inquiries. Check your local building department before you install a garden. Some installments may conflict with local ordinances or zoning regulations. Rain gardens should be a minimum of 10 feet from your house and your neighbor's house to prevent damage from water seepage. If you have a septic system within or on the border of your property, rain gardens should not be placed over or near the drained field. Be mindful that rain gardens are poorly drained, thus should avoid placing a garden in areas in your yard where water tends to collect and sit for periods longer than 48 hours. Avoid installing a garden within the drainage ways such as swales or ditches. Avoid installing a garden under large trees as they have extensive root systems that may be damaged during excavation. Also, not all tree species can tolerate excessive moisture, thus may damage your tree. The first consideration a homeowner should think about is where to put a rain garden. Rain gardens are typically placed around your home where the most runoff occurs, or further out on your lawn where the garden can collect surface water that drains from your property. Places around your home where the highest runoff occurs is often off the roof of your house, paved surfaces, slopes, and compact soils. To figure this out, take the time to evaluate your home during a rain event. After selecting the location, you will need to determine the size of the garden. The size will depend on 3 types of assessments that you will need to do. The assessments include measuring the depth and slope, measuring the drainage area of your roof or property, and evaluating the type of soil you have. Of course, you can have any size garden, though the typical size is between 100 and 300 square feet. You may want to have a pen and paper to record your measurements and evaluations. Depth and slope. What do these terms mean? Depth is how deep you should dig to ensure your rain garden collects and absorbs runoff, but depth is dependent on slope. Slope is how one part of the property might be higher than the other, so garden placement should be considered at the lower end of the slope to catch runoff. The greater the slope, the deeper you'll need to dig. On the other hand, if you build a garden on a flat surface, you won't have to dig as deep, but will need to do the same procedure. Before you begin, you will need 2 stakes, a long string or twine, and a long tape measure. Place one stake on the uphill side and the other stake on the downhill side. Tie a string at ground level to the uphill stake. Then secure the other end of the string to the downhill stake, making sure that the string or twine is leveled. Measure the length between the stakes. Next, you'll want to measure the height between the ground and the downhill stake. Once you have measurements, divide the height by width. Then, take that value and multiply it by 100. This will give you the percentage of slope of the area where you wish to place your garden. Next, refer to this chart to determine the number of inches you will need to dig based on the percentage that you calculated. Keep in mind that if the depth is less than 4 inches deep, the garden will have to be larger in size to provide enough capacity to store water, especially during heavy rain events. On the other hand, if the depth is more than 8 inches deep, the garden will hold water for too long and potentially create water seepage issues. After determining the depth and slope, you will need to calculate the drainage area of your garden. For gardens that are being placed close to the house, you will need to know the area of your roof. If you don't know the area, you can measure the width and length of your house, then multiply them together. This is also called the footprint and is relatively equal to the area of your roof. Next, you will need to count the number of downspouts on your house. Once you have calculated your house's footprint and counted the spouts, you will divide the footprint by the number of downspouts. Then you will multiply that result by the number of downspouts directed to your garden. If you are building a garden that is greater than 30 feet from the downspout, you will need to calculate the area of your lawn. Start by standing in the middle of where you would like to place a garden and determine how much of your lawn will drain into it. Then measure both the length and width in feet of the lawn. Take the measurements and multiply them together to find the area. Afterwards, you can add both the lawn and roof area to get the total drainage area. After figuring out your location and drainage area, you will now need to evaluate the type of soil you have. The type of soil you have will affect how fast water can move through the soil profile and how well the water can percolate through. In general, the northeastern Ohio region has soil types that range from clay to sand and can be categorized into 3 soil profiles: coarse textured soils, intermediate texture soils, and fine texture soils. When building a rain garden, it is preferred to build within sandy soils. However, certain conditions may require some extra steps. Silt, clay, and compact soils reduce percolation and can contribute to drainage issues. To increase water flow, you can increase the size of your garden or replace the soil with a soil mixture. For instance, it's recommended to mix 50 to 60% sand, 20 to 30% loamy topsoil, and 20 to 30% organic matter, also known as yard waste. To figure out what soil type you have, you can perform some basic tests that requires just your observational skills. Test number 1, the feel test. As the test's name suggests, you are feeling the texture of your soil. Take a small portion of moist soil in between your fingertips and roll it around. Sandy soil feels gritty, silty soils feel smooth, and clay soils feel sticky. Test number 2, the ribbon test. You will need a decent chunk of soil to fit in the palm of your hand or between your thumb and forefinger. Moisten the soil until it's putty-like consistency. While rolling it or making a ribbon with your fingers, squeeze the moisture out. Sandy soils will not form a ribbon, silty soils will create a short and weak ribbon, and clay soils will form long, strong ribbons. Test number 3, the dry test. Take some saturated soil and roll it into a ball. Allow the ball to sit for several hours. Once dry, crush the ball between your thumb and forefinger. Sandy soils will crumble easily, silty soils will be firm, and clay soils will be very difficult to crush. If you need further assistance, you can contact your local or county soil water conservation district. This is a subdivision of the state government that develops and implements soil and water conservation programs. They're also a great resource to contact for land evaluations, soil information, and guidance on what kinds of things you can do on your property, including rain garden construction. Now that you have your 3 assessments, we can finally determine the size of your garden. we will look at two tables that provide different size factors. You will only need one of these tables depending how far your garden is from the downspout. For instance, Table 1 is meant for gardens that are less than 30 feet from the downspout, while Table 2 is meant for gardens greater than 30 feet away. To understand the table, look at the soil type you have in your calculated depth to figure out the size factor. For instance, if you have a garden that is less than 30 feet away, has sandy soils, and is 4 inches deep, I want to look at Table 1 for the size factor of 0.19. Then I will want to take the size factor and multiply that value by the total drainage area. This will provide the overall area of how big my garden should be. Notice that Table 2 is a little different. The size factor is for all depths and more dependent on soil type. If for any reason you've calculated your rain garden area to be more than 300 square feet, you will want to divide that garden into smaller sections for efficiency. Overall, a ratio of drainage area to garden size is typically 5:1. For instance, let's say you have 500 square feet of drainage area, you will want to have a garden that is 100 square feet in size. Finally, you will also need to decide the shape of your garden. There are 2 rules of thumb that you can follow. The first rule of thumb to follow is to ensure that the longer side of your garden runs perpendicular to the flow of water. The second rule of thumb is to ensure that the length of your garden should be twice as long as it is wide. Before you begin to build, the last thing you will need to decide is how to direct the highest runoff flow to your garden. When you are installing a garden close to your house, you will want to take advantage of the downspouts attached to your gutters. Depending on how far the garden is, you may need to add an extension so that the runoff can reach the garden. You can also build a grassy swale or a rock-lined channel to direct the flow. If you prefer a route that is hidden, you can attach an underground PVC pipe. Another option is to install a rain barrel to capture the roof runoff. While these options are excellent in obtaining the most benefits of your rain garden, you may need to install landscape fabric, rocks, or bricks at the outlet of the pipe to prevent erosion issues. If you are installing a garden further out onto the property, we previously mentioned to make sure that the garden placement is at the bottom of a slope or a swale. After deciding where to put a rain garden and how big you want it to be, it's time to start digging. Just remember to call about utilities, gas, and oil lines before you dig to ensure that it's safe to do so. General items needed include a tape measure, shovel, rake, carpenter's level, wooden stakes or marking flags, string, trowel, and a hand tamp. You can also use a flat board that is 6 feet long and a small backhoe. To prepare the site, you will likely have a patch of turf grass that will need to be removed. There are several methods to do this. One method that is environmentally friendly and effective is to place either black plastic, several layers of newspapers, or carpet squares to block the sunlight. By doing so, the grass can't photosynthesize and die off. The other option is to use herbicides, though this can be harmful to other neighboring plants. After you have removed the grass, you can set up a perimeter before excavation. You can use stakes, a garden hose, or flags to outline the size and shape of your garden. Now that you have defined the shape and size of your garden, you can start digging. Continue digging until your garden is nearly level and at the appropriate depth. Keep in mind that it is highly important that the base of your garden is leveled out. Rain percolates much better when the bottom of the garden is leveled than the bowl-shaped. If the garden is bowl-shaped, then the water will not properly drain through. There are 2 ways to make sure that you have leveled the bottom of your garden. One is to visually assess it, and the second is to take a more accurate approach. Place a small plank of wood or a board and lay it in the center. Then place a level on the board and see if you need to either dig or fill that area. Do this a few more times throughout the garden and repeat the process until the entire area is leveled. If you are building a garden on a slope of a hill, you will want to make a berm. Water flowing into the garden will want to exit out onto the downhill slope, but the point of a rain garden is keeping water in. After digging, you will have plenty of soil to use as a berm. Make sure to roughen the soil first so that the soil can be strengthened and to maximize contact between soil layers. Shape the rise into a smooth, level ridge that is about 1 foot across and 6 inches high. Afterwards, you will want to use a hand tamp to compact the soil into place. Your berm should have gentle slopes and shouldn't act like a wall. You will also want to make sure that your berm doesn't erode away. After you have constructed your berm, you can grow some grass on it by placing either straw or an erosion control matting to keep the berm protected as the grass takes root. If you would prefer to avoid grass, you can also plant native plants that are dry tolerant. Now we discuss the fun part of a rain garden, deciding which plants to plant. For the most part, a rain garden is planted like any other garden, but homeowners need to consider plants that are both wet and dry tolerant. You can arrange plants in a wildflower arrangement, or you can have a more formal arrangement where plants are arranged in clusters with mulch spaces. Keep in mind, however, the garden will be underwater and can disperse mulch chips out of the garden, leaving a ring-like formation on the perimeter. There are some tips to consider when deciding on which plants you would like in the garden. Consider the height of each plant, the plant's bloom time and color, and the overall texture of the plant. To get a garden that blooms throughout the entire flowering season, pick plants that flower at different periods. Mixing the plants around by height and shape will create more depth and dimension to your garden. Before planting in the ground, lay plants out. Try to clump individual species into groups of 3 or 7 for a bolder statement in color. You can repeat these groups for a cohesive look. You may also want to try to mix a combination of sedges, rushes, and grasses with the flowering plants. Adding diversity of plant types will create a thick root system. When deciding on the species of plants to be in your garden, we highly recommend planting native species. There are several benefits by doing so. Native plants can tough out weather and climatic conditions such as drought or excessive rain events. They can also survive intensive winters, nor do they need fertilizers or pesticides to survive. Native plants attract many native pollinators and wildlife that depend on the plants for their survival. Planting native plants have very deep root systems that can better absorb water and excessive nutrients that may be harmful to our local waterways. In addition, deep root systems can prevent erosion issues once they are established. Lastly, roots that die or break will decompose and enrich the soil. Again, we highly encourage you to plant native species. However, some invasive plants may creep into the garden over time or may be sold in garden centers. We highly encourage you to educate yourself about these plants, and you can use the link within the description to learn a few common invasives that are found in Ohio. Once you have successfully planted your garden, you will need to provide some maintenance for the first year or two to ensure your plants are established. Typically, this includes simple watering and weeding. Plants that are dying back for the winter can either be removed in the fall or left in the spring for wildlife to use, such as insects or rodents. After your garden has had time to establish, you will need to ensure 3 things are maintained in addition to general weeding. For instance, adding an adequate layer of mulch from time to time can limit weeds from growing and prevent erosion. You may want to consider adding organic materials such as yard waste or compost to your garden to maintain soil health and water retention. This will also help strengthen your plants against drought and provide extra nutrients. Inspect berms to ensure there's no soil erosion or animal damage, such as woodchuck burrowing. If you find your berm is damaged, you can simply replace the soil. Furthermore, you can continue to add to your garden by planting more plants or adding shelter for local wildlife. If you select an arrangement of plants that will bloom throughout the spring, summer, and fall, you can take advantage of collecting their seeds. You can use the seeds to either grow more plants by hand, donate to local seed banks, or give them as gifts for friends and family. Seeding is a natural stage in a plant's life cycle to procreate, and plants can disperse their seeds in one of several methods. For instance, seeds that have plume or wing-like structures are typically carried by wind. Seeds that are sticky or prickly will cling to animals as they unintentionally brush against the plant. Plants that grow in aquatic environments usually have pods that disperse their seeds into the water. On the other hand, some semi-aquatic plants, such as cattails, will depend on both wind and water to disperse their seeds. Plants that produce fruit often attract animals to consume them, as the seeds are usually within or on the flesh of the fruit. After ingestion, seeds within the animal's digestive tract will pass through and eventually defecated. Lastly, some plants burst their seed pods and fling the seeds out. Materials for seed collection and storage are quite simple. All you need is a marker to label what species of plant the seeds came from, and either a Ziploc bag, paper envelope, or a small plastic container for storage. You can also use the Native Plants book to help you become familiar with your plants and what kinds of seeds that they produce. Make sure that when you're placing seeds in your bag or container to ensure that there is no moisture. If the seeds are wet from rain or dew, place them on a paper towel and allow them to dry for an hour or two. Moisture will likely result to mold, which may damage your seeds. You will then need to store the seeds in a cool, dry, and dark place such as a pantry shelf or refrigerator to keep the seeds viable. Keep in mind though, some plants may need to go through a freeze and thaw cycle to germinate, such as a pawpaw tree. There's a link within the description that describes which native species may need a winter cycle before germinating. Once seeds are stored, they can last for several years, however it's best to use the seeds within a year or two. Typically, seeds can be planted or sown any time of the year. Though some seeds overwinter well outdoors, others may need to start indoors and then sown directly into the soil during the spring period. You may need to extend your research further on this subject and try to sow seeds a few times to determine what works best for you. To provide some examples of these dispersal methods, one of our staff members will showcase some of Old Creek's native rain garden plants and when to harvest them.
Alright, hello, my name is Sebastian Mejia. So you've already learned a little bit about rain gardens. So once the colors of your rain garden go from all the vibrant yellows and pinks and purples to kind of different shades of brown, you might want to start thinking about seed collecting. Alright, so depending on the types of plants you have in your rain garden, if they're native, they'll be true to form. So here I have a field guide to wildflowers. There's a Newcomb field guide. There are plenty of field guides out there so that you can identify what you have in your rain garden if you have volunteers or if you don't remember planting a specific one. We'll discuss tall ironweed today, as well as a couple others, but tall ironweed has this really vibrant purple flower. The fruit is an achene, or the seed type is an achene, and so these are wind dispersed. When they dry out, you can essentially pull the flower head inflorescence and then save the seed as the whole head, or you could even pull them out one by one, although the seeds are contained within that fluorescence. Alright, so another plant you might find is jewelweed. Jewelweed has capsule seeds that disperse by bursting. And so there's a hydrostatic pressure where if you touch the seed, it pops. And that's how the seeds disperse. So these are best not collected, but actually directly sown. So you'll pop a couple seed pods or let them pop on their own, wherever you want in your garden. Just know that these are very prolific, especially in moist conditions, and might overcrowd your garden. Alright, so here we have goldenrod. This isn't a plant that we planted in the Old Creek rain garden. It's a volunteer species, but the benefits of a rain garden is that you have a lot of volunteers as well as opportunities for pollination. So goldenrod is very well pollinated in the later fall months. And then here we have Joe Pye weed. So Joe Pye weed is now ready to harvest. So these seeds are wind dispersed. You can essentially leave them in the garden and let them seed for the next year. They're annuals. Or you can collect them and put them in different spots in your garden if you'd like. They are very tall growers, so being strategic about where you plant is important. Alright, so here we have swamp rose mallow. You'll notice the seed heads or seed pods aren't quite ready for harvesting. They're still pretty green, but they come in different colors, pinks and reds. So here we have a seed head from the year before. We waited for the seed pod to dry out on the plant, and then once it was dry we put it in a Ziploc bag and all the seeds fell out. So here you'll notice all the different seeds, and this is a prolific grower, an annual, and you can plant wherever you'd like in your rain garden.
We hope you find this video helpful and will be encouraged to create a beautiful rain garden. As emphasized throughout the video, the description has several links viewers can explore to learn more about rain gardens, native plants, gardening tips, and seed collection. We highly encourage viewers to download the Rain Garden Manual provided by the Erie Conservation District webpage to have on hand. Feel free to contact your local resources for further questions and to ensure your installation plan goes smoothly. Despite the colder months are approaching, spending the time to plan your garden will help you better prepare for what you need to do in the spring and summer. Happy gardening!